I remember those mornings so clearly, even now. The sunlight would slip softly through the curtains, hitting the kitchen table where I'd sit with a mug of steaming coffee, the aroma mingling with the faint scent of toast from the oven. My family moved around me, almost like clockwork, my mom humming softly as she packed lunches, my dad reading the newspaper at the corner chair, my brother already scrolling through his phone, headphones in, lost in his own world. On the surface, it looked peaceful, ordinary even. But there was always a small knot in my chest I couldn't quite name, a subtle tension that I tried to ignore. We laughed sometimes, shared stories over breakfast, made casual plans for the weekend. I thought those moments meant something. I thought we were close. I never imagined things could turn this way. Yet even then, little things lingered at the edges, a fleeting glance that didn't meet mine, a comment that felt offhand but stung anyway, the way conversations would stop abruptly when I entered the room. I brushed it off as normal family quirks, convinced I was overthinking. There was a strange comfort in the routine. The smell of my dad's coffee, the creak of the wooden floors under my mom's feet, my brother's laughter echoing down the hallway. Yet every so often, a shadow would flicker across one of their faces, a hint of impatience, of distance. I didn't understand it then. I thought our family was unshakable, that these tiny ripples were meaningless. Even as I sipped my coffee that morning, watching the sunlight dance across the table, I felt the unease crawl up my spine like an uninvited guest. I didn't know it yet, but the calmness of that house, the warmth, the laughter, the normalcy, was about to shatter. And the world I thought I understood so well was about to turn into something unrecognizable. At first, it was small, almost laughable, if I hadn't felt the sting each time it happened. Invitations left unspoken, jokes that suddenly felt private when I entered the room, casual plans made without me, things that should have been trivial, but somehow pierced deeper than I expected. I remember standing in the living room one evening, watching my family huddle over something on the phone, whispering and laughing, pretending I wasn't there. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I was reading too much into harmless banter. But the pit in my stomach refused to lie. That I started noticing the way my words would float into the room and bounce off invisible walls. Questions I asked were met with clipped answers, distractions, or, worse, silence. Even my brother, who I had thought of as my ally, began shutting me out subtly. He'd glance at me briefly, maybe smirk at something only he and the others understood, then turn away. It was like being on the outside of a club I never applied to join. And the worst part? The smiles didn't change, the laughter didn't stop, but it felt rehearsed now, a performance I wasn't part of. I tried rationalizing it, of course. Maybe they were busy, maybe it was nothing. But the unease kept creeping in, a quiet, nagging presence that refused to be ignored. I found myself walking through the house, empty corridors echoing, feeling the weight of absence even when everyone was around. Every closed door, every whispered conversation, every glance that avoided mine became a subtle confirmation. I was fading into the background of the life I thought I shared with them. Even in those first signs, I clung to hope. I told myself I was overreacting, that they still loved me, that families sometimes have moments like this. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and with it, a slow, creeping awareness that the world I relied on for comfort might not be what it seemed. Something was shifting, quietly, almost imperceptibly, but it was shifting nonetheless. That I'll never forget the moment I realized they weren't coming back. It started with a plan, something simple, mundane even. They said they were going out for the weekend, that I should stay behind because you've got things to handle here. I remember nodding, smiling, pretending it was fine, even as a small flicker of doubt danced in my chest. I watched them pack their bags, their movements casual, too casual, the laughter between them a little too light. I told myself not to read too much into it, not to imagine betrayal where there might be none. But as the car pulled away, the sound of its tires fading down the driveway, an icy realization hit me. I wasn't supposed to be part of this anymore. Hours passed. And then a day. And then two. I called, texted, even left notes in the kitchen like a child hoping for a reply. The house grew unbearably quiet, each tick of the clock echoing like a reminder that I was utterly alone. I remember standing at the window that first night, the cold steel of the handle pressing against my fingers, staring out into the dark street, hoping against hope that I'd see them return. But the world stayed still, indifferent. No headlights, no familiar voices, just silence. The betrayal didn't feel immediate. It crept up like a shadow stretching across the room. The longer I waited, the heavier the air became. The more the walls seemed to close in on me. I scavenged for food, tried to keep busy with chores, anything to make the emptiness bearable, but it was no use. Every sound outside made my heart jump, every unexpected noise a reminder that someone might be coming, but they never did. I realized, painfully, that I had been left to fend for myself, abandoned in a world that was suddenly colder, louder, and more hostile than I could have. Imagined that I in the quiet moments, when the adrenaline faded and I could finally think. I kept replaying their smiles from that morning. How could they look me in the eye and pretend everything was normal, knowing they were leaving me behind? The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a cage, every shadow a whisper of their betrayal. And I understood, with a gut sinking clarity, that my world had been irrevocably changed by the people I trusted most. The first night alone felt endless. The quiet was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards or the hum of the refrigerator. Every little sound made me jump, my pulse hammering in my ears. I realized quickly that survival wasn't just about food or shelter, it was about holding on to my own sanity. I rummaged through the kitchen, counting cans and packets of food, stacking them like it mattered, as if organizing them could somehow make the world less cruel. The house, once familiar and comforting, now felt alien, every corner hiding shadows that seemed to stretch toward me. I started walking through the rooms over and over, checking doors, windows, imagining footsteps that never came. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of them leaving, the smirk on my brother's face, the laughter my parents shared without a thought for me. I tried talking to myself, whispering out loud just to hear another voice, but the emptiness always answered back. My phone became both a lifeline and a torment. Texts left unanswered, calls ignored, notifications that reminded me they had moved on while I was stuck here, alone. Days blurred together. The routine I had once taken for granted, breakfast with my family, shared jokes, casual conversations, was gone. Now it was a loop of cold meals, long walks through the empty house, staring out windows at the world that kept moving without me. I kept thinking about what I could have done differently, what warning signs I had missed. Every memory that used to bring comfort now felt like salt in a wound. Yet through it all, a stubborn part of me refused to give in. I had to survive. If only to prove that I didn't need them to exist, I began rationing supplies, keeping notes, planning small tasks just to feel control over something in my life. The fear was constant, gnawing at the edges of my mind, but beneath it, there was also a strange clarity. Alone, stripped of the people I trusted most, I discovered my own resilience. I realized that survival was not just about staying alive physically. It was about holding on to myself, my thoughts, my dignity, even as the world I knew seemed to have abandoned me. In the quiet moments, when the adrenaline of survival faded, memories would come crashing back, uninvited and sharp. I'd sit on the worn couch, the fabric rough against my palms, and suddenly I was back in the warmth of our living room, the sunlight spilling through the windows on lazy Sunday mornings. I remembered my brother's laughter echoing off the walls, my mom making pancakes with a flourish, my dad telling the same corny joke for the 100th time, and I believed it all meant we were untouchable, that nothing could shake our bond. But now, those memories cut deeper than the loneliness ever could. I remembered our last real Sunday together, the one I thought was ordinary. We had joked, argued, and laughed until our sides hurt. I had thought it was just like every other weekend, just a snapshot of normal life. Little did I know it was the calm before the storm, the last fragment of the world I thought I had. The warmth of their presence, the smell of breakfast, the sound of the coffee percolating in the kitchen, it all felt like a cruel trick now, a reminder of what I had lost. I would replay it over and over, questioning if I had seen the signs, if I could have done something, anything, to stop what came next. Even the small, seemingly insignificant moments stung now. The way my brother used to nudge me when he wanted to share a secret, the quiet good night from my mom before she went to bed, my dad's soft, "I'm proud of you," when he thought I wasn't listening. They all turned into echoes that mocked me in my solitude. The house, which had once been a place of comfort, became a hall of ghosts. I could almost hear their voices in the empty rooms, laughter and whispers blending with the wind outside, taunting me with what could have been. It was in these reflections that anger began to mix with grief. The sting wasn't just from missing them, it was from understanding, slowly and painfully, that they had chosen something else over me. I realized that while I had clung to memories as a lifeline, they had already moved on, leaving me to wrestle with the past alone. And yet, in that pain, a tiny ember of clarity started to grow. I understood that holding on to these memories wasn't about reliving the hurt. It was about acknowledging my worth, even if they didn't, that I wasn't prepared for them to come back. Not like this. The sound of a car crunching on the driveway made my chest tighten before I even saw them. And there they were, my family, stepping out like nothing had happened, my brother at their side, grinning in a way that made my stomach twist. It didn't take long to realize why they were here. The inheritance. Every laugh, every casual hello felt hollow, rehearsed, a mask for the greed that had brought them back. My heart ached with disbelief and fury, a cocktail of emotions. I couldn't untangle that. I remember standing frozen in the doorway, the cold air hitting my skin, the sound of the wind mixing with the faint squeal of tires. My mind raced, replaying the abandonment. Every lonely hour, every moment I had tried to reach them and found only silence. How could they return with smiles, carrying themselves as if nothing had happened, when I had been left to survive alone? The world I had rebuilt for myself in those dark days suddenly felt fragile, threatened by the very people who were supposed to protect it. That I watched them talk to neighbors, laugh lightly at jokes, and wave as if I were invisible. Their motives were clear without a single word spoken. The glint of greed in their eyes, the subtle way my brother lingered near their side, calculating, opportunistic. And though my hands itched to lash out, to demand explanations, I knew that any reaction would only give them the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. So I kept still, letting the silence speak for me, letting them wander through the house that had once been shared and now felt like my kingdom alone. And beneath the shock and anger, a quiet realization began to take root. I didn't need to confront them immediately. They had returned for the wrong reasons, and that meant I had the power, not them. I could respond on my own terms, with clarity, with control. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time, to know that the same people who had abandoned me were now walking back into my life, unaware that the balance had shifted. And in that moment, I understood that this was no longer about forgiveness or reconciliation. It was about reclaiming what was mine in spirit, even if not in possession. I wanted to scream at them, to throw the truth in their faces and watch them squirm. I wanted to ask how they could leave me to fend for myself, only to return with smiles as if nothing had happened. But every time I opened my mouth, the words stuck, lodged somewhere between anger and disbelief. So instead, I watched. I let the silence stretch between us, letting it hum with the weight of everything they had done. In some twisted way, it felt more powerful than shouting. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide how this story would end. Inside, the fight was worse than anything I could show on the surface. My thoughts were a storm, crashing over me in waves. Do I tell them how I suffered? Do I expose their greed? Or do I remain calm and let my absence of reaction speak louder than any accusation? I paced the rooms, wringing my hands, replaying every detail of their return, every subtle smirk, every glance exchanged with my brother. The anger burned hot, but beneath it, a deeper, colder feeling settled, a certainty that I could no longer rely on them. That trust was something I would have to reclaim for myself. When they finally looked at me, expecting perhaps confusion or guilt, I met their eyes with nothing but quiet resolve. I said nothing at first, letting the weight of my silence fill the space. Each word I had rehearsed, the confrontations, the accusations, was stored like a weapon for later. Inwardly, I scolded myself for the rage that bubbled so easily, and yet I embraced it, using it to sharpen my mind. I realized that confrontation wasn't just about speaking. It was about choosing how to respond, maintaining dignity while they revealed their true colors. The tension was almost unbearable. Every small movement, every glance, Every pause in conversation felt loaded with meaning. I was both participant and observer, wrestling with my own impulses while measuring theirs. And in the quiet, between the false laughter and polite greetings, I made a decision. I wouldn't let them control the narrative. I would reclaim my story, my space, and my peace, not by yelling, not by begging for apologies, but by asserting my presence on my own terms. This confrontation wasn't over, but I had found the first thread of control in a situation where I had been utterly powerless. I sat at the desk that evening, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the room, and finally let myself breathe. The anger, the disbelief, the hurt, they all swirled inside me, demanding release. I picked up a pen, feeling its weight in my hand, and realized that words were my weapon now. I didn't need to yell, to fight, or to beg. I could pour everything into this letter, every raw thought, every quiet fury, every shred of dignity they had tried to strip from me. Writing it became an act of reclaiming myself, a declaration that I was no longer their victim. The first lines were shaky. My hand trembled as I wrote, the ink bleeding slightly on the paper as if the pen itself understood the emotion behind each word. I wrote about the abandonment, the loneliness, the nights I spent counting the hours while the world carried on without me. I wrote about the subtle betrayals, the smiles that had been rehearsed, the laughter that had masked indifference. I didn't hold back. Every sentence was carefully chosen, each word a mirror reflecting the truth I had carried silently for too long. As the letter grew longer, I felt something shift inside me. The fury that had once felt suffocating became focused, precise. I imagined their faces as they read it, the surprise, the discomfort, the realization that their actions had consequences beyond what they had imagined. And yet, amidst the anger, there was also a strange calmness, a quiet satisfaction that I was taking control in the only way they hadn't anticipated. This wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity, about drawing a line that they could not cross, about asserting that I was still here, unbroken. When I finished, I set the pen down and stared at the letter for a long time. It felt heavy, but also liberating. I folded it carefully, the crisp creases symbolizing a boundary I had drawn with my own hands. I didn't need their permission, their apology, or their recognition. This letter was mine, my voice, my power. And as I placed it where they would find it, I realized that for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt a sense of control returning, quiet, unwavering, and completely mine. The silence after I left the letter was almost unbearable. I watched from a distance, heart pounding, as my family discovered it. I didn't need to see their faces up close. The way they moved, the way they paused, the sudden tension in the air, it said everything. I imagined my brother fumbling with the words, my parents' expressions flickering between confusion, guilt, and anger. I let it play out without interference, knowing that the impact of my voice on paper was more powerful than any confrontation I could have forced. For the first time, I wasn't pleading for recognition. I was letting the truth speak for itself. In the days that followed, there was an odd mixture of emptiness and relief. The house felt lighter, almost peaceful, now that the weight of unspoken grievances had been transformed into something tangible, something I could control. I still thought about them sometimes, about the absence, the betrayal, but those thoughts no longer had the same power to break me. I realized I didn't need their acknowledgement to validate my suffering. I had endured, I had survived, and I had asserted my worth in a way they could neither erase nor dismiss. That I began to rebuild my routine. Small acts of normalcy that had once felt mundane now carried a weight of triumph. I cooked my own meals, I organized my space, I allowed myself to laugh again without guilt. And even though the echo of their absence lingered, it was accompanied by a new kind of clarity, a realization that my life no longer revolved around those who had abandoned me. I could define my own boundaries, my own happiness, without waiting for their permission or approval. The letter had done more than confront them. It had reminded me who I was. I wasn't just a person left behind. I was someone who could endure, reflect, and reclaim power even in the darkest moments. And as I finally let myself relax, watching the sunrise spill gold across the windows, I felt an unfamiliar, thrilling sense of liberation. For the first time, I understood that letting go of anger didn't mean forgetting. It meant reclaiming the life that was always mine, even when they tried to take it from me. Sitting by the window, watching the morning light stretch across the floor, I felt a quiet sense of clarity that had been impossible during the chaos. I thought about everything that had happened: the abandonment, the betrayal, the long nights of solitude, the moments when I questioned my own strength. And yet, here I was, still standing, still breathing, still me. I realized that survival had taught me more than anger or resentment ever could. It had taught me resilience, self-respect, and the unshakable truth that my worth was never defined by anyone else's choices. That I thought about my family, about the paths we had each chosen. I didn't need to understand them, didn't need to forgive them. Not yet, maybe not ever. What mattered was the life I was choosing now, the boundaries I was setting, the voice I refused to let them silence. I could carry the memories without letting them weigh me down. I could feel the sting without letting it define me. Every step forward was a statement. I was reclaiming myself, building my world without waiting for validation, without letting past wounds dictate my future. That I began to imagine the days ahead with a kind of careful hope. Simple things: walking outside without fear, laughing freely, pursuing goals I had put aside, suddenly felt like victories. I understood that healing wasn't a single moment, but a series of choices, each one a reaffirmation of who I was and who I wanted to become. And in that realization, I found freedom. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, enduring kind that seeps into every decision, every thought, every breath. Looking back, the journey had been brutal, but it had also been clarifying. I had survived what I thought would destroy me, and in the process, I had discovered the parts of myself that were unbreakable. And as I stepped into a new day, feeling the warmth of sunlight on my face, I knew this was only the beginning. My life was mine to shape, mine to protect, mine to live, free from fear, free from dependency, and, most importantly, free from the ghosts of those who had once abandoned me.